Hey, it's Jack, and this video is how do you deal with unconscious people? Hey, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do that. We've got a really powerful and growing community here. I love you all, your questions and comments, I so appreciate. You can just click the button here, click subscribe, and then hit that bell notification so that you hear of new videos as soon as they come out. So, how do you deal with unconscious people? This is a common question in the sense that when you are on a path of development and you're evolving and you're doing the work, which so many of you in this community are doing, you might notice that there are people in your life that are not doing the work and are not committed to the path and don't care about their evolution or spiritual development, and that you're kind of headed in slightly different directions. And you might notice that whether it's friends or co-workers or family or neighbors or people you encounter in the coffee shop, that there are people that maybe don't have the consciousness that you have or aspire to have. Or maybe there are just ways that people show up that are limited and under-resourced and frustrating and ill-intended and hurtful. And you're asking yourself, well, I want to deal with this skillfully. I don't want to turn a blind eye to this. I want to be with it. I want to face it. But how do I actually deal with that? So I want to give you an assortment of ideas in this video that I think are really going to help in this territory. And I'd love for you to stay to the end because they're quite different. This is not going to be a linear video. This is a non-linear video in terms of the different ideas that I'm going to introduce. So the first thing that you can get curious about when you're dealing with unconscious people is anything that might be on your side of the fence. So another way of saying this is, how do you deal with what comes up in you when you are around, quote, unconscious people? And what might come up in you might be frustration. What might come up in you may be anger. What come up in you may very well be judgment. And you can use these things as grist to your meal. I don't know where I get off saying this. You can use these things as grist to your own mill, by which I mean is that you can use them to power your own development. Because anytime that you're in judgment of someone else, probably, I do actually think there is a social utility to judgment, that there's things collectively that we judge and that creates better outcomes as a society. If you just put that aside, on the individual level, if you're judging, there's probably a way that you might be able to relax that judgment, or there might be something that you don't accept in other people because you don't accept it in you. So there may be ways that you perceive other people to be unconscious. And you might be objectively accurate. We might say, yeah, that's kind of unconscious behavior. Like a group of us could kind of observe that situation and maybe come to a consensus reality. But it might be that that unconsciousness also lives in certain ways within you, right? That there may be a thing that you see other people doing. Like let's say they put themselves first. And that there's a way that you don't allow yourself to put yourself first that at times would serve you, right? If your dominant orientation to reality is I put myself first, yeah, it might be that that's not pro-social. It might be that that's egoic. It might be that that's something you want to learn how to relax. But if you can never put yourself first, that might be a problem, right? If you're really ill, you might need to put yourself first, right? If you're really struggling financially, you might need to put yourself first. If you are in a time of intense transition where you don't even know who you're becoming, you might need to put yourself first. So this is all about having access to the energy, having access to the possibility without it necessarily being your dominant reality. So anytime that you find yourself in judgment of other people, it might be an opportunity for you to notice, hey, is there anything that I can learn about this? And you can, Byron Katie's work you might come across, you can turn something around, you can notice, well, if this is the other way, right? So, I have a judgment on this person that they are not spiritual enough. Is it possible that I'm running a racket on myself, that I'm not spiritual enough? Do I put pressure on myself that I have to be spiritual? So you can use other people to wake you up. And if you haven't been in this orientation, this will create huge territory in your life, because most of the day, most of us are getting, at least micro-triggered, right, by situations, other people. And it can be really empowering if you're like, thank you for triggering me. Right? Thank you for that micro trigger. Thank you for waking something up. And, I'm not trying to have you set an impossible standard. I can totally think of, even in the last days and weeks, the times when I haven't been able to be in this perspective, where it's like, I'm not thankful that I'm feeling upset or triggered or micro triggered. But in the bigger reality, when I'm resourced, that is what I want, because I want to be free, right? I want to be whole. I want to be able to show up in my fullness. And these little places that I get tight and I age regress and I become young, or I get tight and I withdraw from people, that's the place that is my edge of development. right? That's the place that I want to be continuing to wake up and notice like, oh yeah, there's something that I'm not including. So rather than being how do I deal with conscious people, then the frame can be how can I invite more unconscious people in my life in certain ways. Now, we also want to draw some perhaps harder boundaries where there's certain types of behavior, right? So it might be that there's abusive behavior, or it might be that there's completely antisocial behavior, and that you want to learn how to draw your boundaries. So a big part of how you deal with unconscious people might be looking at, well, where are your own boundaries? Are you needing to be loving and kind when actually what you need to do in a loving way is to hold a boundary and say, hey, I love and appreciate you, and that kind of behavior doesn't really work for me, or nothing good is coming out of this interaction right now. I'm going to hold a boundary. I'm going to go and take some time out, but I'm happy to talk about this when we're in a better place, or name a time, particularly if you're in a couple. You might want to name a time if you can. Again, that's not always easy if you've ruptured in certain ways. But the point is that you are you're not tolerating behavior that doesn't work for you. But the way that you do it isn't that you have to reject the other person, isn't that you have to spin out into a story of how could anyone behave like that. Anytime that you're incredulous about other people's behavior, I really invite you to look internally. Anytime that you're in a superiority about other people's behavior, how dare they, how could they think that, how could they say that to me? Anytime you're in that orientation, I invite you to notice that you might be out to lunch. And what I mean by out to lunch is that you may be lacking your own presence. You may be a bit over there in your critique of them, and there may be a need to keep bringing it back over here. Again, personally, I know this can be a big one. If I hit a certain level of something has pissed me off, or I'm angry about it, I might start to get a bit over there, right? A bit preachy, a bit judgy, and learning how to keep over here and notice like, oh, yeah, what comes up for me is why am I behaving in a way that isn't allowing me access to that? Like, if I knew those were the rules of the game, why have I been doing all this effort or investing in this way, right? Because a lot of us want balanced relationships. We want some sense of, there's two people contributing, and there's not one set of rules for one person and another set of rules for the other. So it might be that in noticing what you're calling unconscious behavior in other people, it's actually inviting you to notice, well, do I have some implicit requests that I need to make explicit? Or is there a certain way that I'm showing up that doesn't appear to be landing in the other person's reality, right? Maybe there's ways that you're serving them that they don't even realize. Or maybe there's things that you're tolerating that you could be okay tolerating if there was an open mutual tolerance going on. But if that's not going on, perhaps now you're wanting something else. Right? So it's ways that you get to kind of clean up your way of showing up. You get to clean up agreements with people to make more things explicit. So that can be another advantage of this, that one of the key skills that I see in people having more effective relationships is their ability to renegotiate agreements with themselves and with other people. So if there's a certain way that the relationship's occurring to you where you feel like you're carrying it, right, that you're making more of the effort, that you're the one that's showing up, or you're the one that's being more flexible, or you're the one that's investing more, what is going on there? Because it might be that actually you need to, rather than have the other person change, it might be like, oh, actually, I'm over-invested in this relationship and I need to reorient some of that attention elsewhere, maybe to myself or maybe to someone else. So it's not always about getting the other person to change. It might be about creating a more healthy dynamic with them where your own patterns and your own personas, the good one, the responsible one, the caring one, the martyr, the caregiver, the hero, maybe those things are kicking in, and that if you could relax that persona, you would be more chilled about how you and the other person show up. Now, another big piece here, as you might have come across in other videos of mine, is what we call subjectification, right? And when I'm subjectifying you, I'm basically saying you should be behaving in a certain way, or the way that you are behaving, I know what the intention is because I have that same behavior myself. So I subjectify you anytime that I kind of imagine more information than I actually have about what's showing up for you or why you're behaving a certain way. The reason that you're not talking to me might be different than if I weren't talking to you. If I weren't talking to you, it might be because I'm upset with you. If you're not talking to me, it might be that you're just like quiet. Right? If you can only survive for half an hour in a social interaction, then you need to go and rest. If that were me, it might mean that you'd bored me. But for you, it might just be that, there's a limit to how much time you can spend socially. So how you deal with unconscious people is you start to notice the ways that you subjectify them. So again, this is another way that unconscious people can wake you up, because if you're subjectifying them, you're kind of running this little racket on them. There's a little internal program that's making them wrong for something that Maybe they don't need to be made wrong from. Maybe they're just different than you. Maybe they have different motivations, different ideas, different possibilities. And your ability to relax your subjectification, it basically serves you because it just allows you to be with more stuff with people. It allows you to be with more weirdness. You basically acknowledge, I'm weird and you're weird. I have my weirdness, you have your weirdness. Let's be cool with that. Right? Now again, if someone's doing something weird in a way that's really hurting you or harming you, you may need to draw that loving boundary and take your space or get your distance, or even sometimes in extremities, you may want to take someone out of your life and just say, at this time in my life, it's not serving me to have you in my life. That could be okay. You still might want to do it from a place of love if you can, right? Where it's kind of like, I'm not just doing this to reject you, I'm doing this because I actually think it kind of serves in the bigger picture, and it might serve you as well. You're not doing it from a place of judgment and rejection, you're doing it from a place of kind of sobriety and love, if possible. Now, the other thing that you may want to be aware of when you're dealing with, quote, unconscious people is that people have different worldviews. And different worldviews, in the way that I'm using this term, means that they have different motivations, they have a different sense of what it means to be a human. Their sense of who I am and who you are is different in the way that you look at people, right? You might look at people as ever evolving, right? Open-ended systems of upwards kind of consciousness. Someone else might look at people as fixed. You're kind of born how you're born, and that's their reality about people. An apple's an apple, and a person's a person. They don't really change. Now, we could get into that and say which one is more, objectively true. It might be that each one is objectively true in different subjective realities, right? By which I mean that if you are in a certain frame of consciousness, something is somewhat true that just wouldn't be true if you were in your frame of consciousness. So all of this is kind of a permission to open up the script and notice, there's no reason why other people are going to parse reality in the way that you do. Now, you may think your way is better. That may or may not be true. But you don't really get further in life by kind of being down on people that have a lesser, quote, worldview than you, right? Because that's your own unconsciousness in some ways that starts to kick in, right? Your own projection, your own superiority, your own judgment. So again, you can use this unconsciousness that you're seeing in other people to be like, maybe I could be more curious about their experience. Maybe there's a way that they interpret reality, that if I interpreted reality in the way that they interpret reality, even if I think that's a dumb way to interpret reality, I would be drawing the same conclusion, or I would be having the same experience in them, right? If someone has never had the experience of finding other people trustworthy, it doesn't really make sense that they're going to trust people. So you're going to get a whole lot of behavior from them that might treat you like you're an untrustworthy person. I've had this in a relationship before, and it can be really hard when you're like, I sense I'm somewhat trustworthy, and I'm being treated as if I'm a really untrustworthy person. How do I deal with that? Now, I can only look at that through the frame of, their lack of trust, their past, their wound has them being lacking in trust. I don't really have anything to do. Or I can try and be in relationship with them and notice that if I was in their subjective reality, I would be having a hard time too. And maybe I need to go the extra mile to build trust with them, which I wouldn't in another relationship. Or maybe I didn't have to do that with my previous partner. But because I actually care about being with what is, I care about you and the person in front of me, and I want a relationship with you, there might be all sorts of things that I want to get with in order that I can be in relationship with you. And that might look very different than what's needed with someone else, right? So there's all these kind of quirks that we can call unconsciousness, or we can at the same time kind of get in our hearts and love a little and notice, there may just be more that life needs from me in order to be in rapport with this person. And that's not always easy if you've got your own challenges and frustrations and lack of energy or whatever it is. But it's kind of an invitation, again, rather than just be in the, you are being unconscious, therefore I'm going to create more distance. It's like, if I really walked a mile in your shoes, I would probably have a lot of the same experiences, and I might be drawing some of the same conclusions that you are. Or even you're drawing a silly conclusion, but the fact that you're drawing that conclusion, I can see that is hurting you, and I care about the fact that that's hurting you, even if I know why it's hurting you. Right? There's lots of decisions that we might make in life that make things worse for ourselves, but they're still human to be able to be in kind of connection and contact with someone else. So all of this is to say life is an ongoing invitation to your own presence, right? If you get that the reason that someone is being unconscious is because of their wounds, is because of their defenses, is because of their experience of their upbringing, is because they've been betrayed in relationships, whatever it is, you may take it less personally when they orient to you in a certain way that is not the way that you wish they oriented to you, right? Like maybe they don't trust you, or maybe they're upset with you, or maybe you trigger something in them that is flooding them with memories of something that was super difficult, and now the memories are taken over. And you can look at that and say that that's unconsciousness, and at one level, yeah, okay, someone's drifting in the past and is kind of re-traumatizing themselves with this wound. But you can also say, I want to be in connection with that person, and I might have to dig a little bit deep here to resource myself to stay in connection with them, right? Like the more you're good, the more you're resourced, the more you're integrated, the more you're cool and okay with who you are, the more generally it's easier to be with a whole range of people, right? In their light and in their dark. So if you have this problem recurring that I've got a lot of unconscious people in my life, maybe you need to take a stand and invite new friendships or a different kind of authenticity. But maybe as things refine in you, it becomes less of a problem, right? This is sort of the advice when people say, go home. Go home, go be with your parents. Go be with your place of origin. A lot of people on a transformational path find that difficult because they sense that they may be evolved in ways that their parents don't get or their upbringing doesn't get. Or they sense that the things that they're working on are traumas that they developed in their childhood, and there's blame and resentment towards their parents for that. Now, again, none of this is about tolerating, abusive behavior or trying to re-traumatize you. It's just noticing that the more you're good and integrated and that your spiritual development is real, the more you actually might want to be connected to what brought you into this reality, to the people that helped you incarnate, to the people that, whether you believe you chose them or life chose them or it just is, that there's some significance to that lineage that you might want to heal. And you don't heal it by just running an ongoing complaint on your upbringing, right? Or by not forgiving. Maybe some people really f you over bad, and that any of us would see that, and that's terrible. But you don't grow by keeping that resentment locked in your heart, right? You grow by actually releasing and forgiving and noticing, yeah, maybe there were some bad decisions and there were some bad actors, but maybe that's because their own upbringings had bad decisions and bad actors, or maybe it's that they were doing the best they could do, and the best they could do fell well short of any objective standard that you and I would say was good parenting. But the reality is, often as we heal our own hearts and our own places, the things sometimes that we thought were really bad, maybe they weren't quite so bad in certain ways, or the ways that we've looked at people and said, oh, they can't meet me here. It's actually, the problem is not so much that they can't meet you here, it's that you are in pain when people don't see you in certain ways. And that as you relax that, as you relax your identity to need to be seen in a certain way, you can go home and break bread and actually enjoy the company of, let's say, your parents, because you're not needing them to be a certain thing for you. You're not only looking at them through the wound or the projection, right? So the other way that you can deal with, quote, unconsciousness in your past is by maybe noticing if there's places in you that you actually need to get off your high horse of the spiritual path and kind of level and notice that everyone is on a journey, everyone is on a path, and that you may not be as accurate as you think in seeing how conscious people are, because the terrain of consciousness is a varied and diverse terrain, and you might be super advanced in certain ways and you might have a lot of homework to do in others that you didn't even realize. So I guess all that to say, be humble, and you might not be the authority on how conscious and unconscious people are in the way that you've taken yourself to be, and everyone's got something that they can teach you, and particularly the people that brought you into this world, there may be things that they can teach you that you can go and reconnect and drink from that fountain. There's a lot of us in the transformational communities that seem less connected to the traditional structures of family, and there's something to be said for the traditional structures of family. So that's my invitation, that's my hope for you. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Please take my free webinar if you haven't. You also can follow me on Instagram. I'm starting to build out there more, so I'd love for you to click the link and join me on Instagram. Questions and comments welcome. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.